Hey guys, I hope you're well. In this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about knee pain and its relationship to the foot and particularly the big toe. We see quite commonly that people with knee pain have also a bunion, or at least some degree of a bunion, which is the big toe coming inwards, a hallux valgus. And I want to show you an example of like a fairly extreme case of this, working with Tom, who's a good buddy of mine, a good hiking buddy of mine, and someone that I go to the gym with regularly. And on this particular day, Tom had said to me, hey, I woke up and I can barely bend my knee. I'm not going to be able to go to the gym. And of course I said, let's go to the gym because we'll be able to figure this out. Tom has had a rich history of knee pain. He's had 2 surgeries. He has a significant bunion, which you'll see in a second. And so we went into the gym, and this is what, this is not exactly what we went through, but this is what I've programmed for him in his case. And I think this is something that he can do 3 times a week for probably 6 weeks and see some massive, and that's in my best interest since he is a hiking buddy of mine. Tom's a snowboarder. You know, he's just recently got into hiking. You've probably seen him on the channel, and so this is the session that I've built for him. But this came about through a little bit of experimentation. Now, it's not to say that every single one of your sessions needs to be custom built. Like this situation is so prevalent. Like bunions and knee pain together, they're like best friends. So someone who's in a similar situation could just rinse and repeat this and probably get a pretty similar outcome. Tom was able to lunge at the end of the session. So from being able to not even bend your knee to be able to like lunge pretty comfortably and do it reasonably well was a pretty good outcome. So I want to take you through my thought process here of how this session came together, and perhaps it'll be helpful for you to understand a little bit more about your own situation. The first thing we did is just try and make the knee feel immediately better. And so I really like this banded terminal knee extension for just getting some blood flow into the knee. Like this is one of the first things that we give people. Band around the back of the knee, just restore some comfortable flexion and extension. He's doing it on both legs, so I had to cue him to just do one leg. And so a band around the back of the knee, or a floss band wrapped around the knee, and just getting into a deep squat, or as deep a squat as you can get into. I absolutely love that for just immediately making the knee feel better when you've had one of those days where it's just completely locked up. So that was literally the first thing that we did. The second thing that we did is I wanted to look at his tibial internal rotation. So the tibia is this bone here, and to some degree it needs to be able to internally rotate. Like that bone needs to be able to come inwards. Internal rotation is a way that we can collect downforce and absorb downforce. And so when I tested Tom on this, I found that he just could not really internally rotate this bone. And again, for anterior knee pain, this is one of the first things that we look at. Can the tibia internally rotate? So he got a little bit of internal rotation, but what happened in his foot was very, very interesting. I don't think I have a good video of it, but as he was, moving his foot inwards, there was a heap of lifting of that first metatarsal. It was just lifting up in the air, and his big toe was crunching. And so straight away I'm thinking this is a very, very relevant relationship between the big toe and the knee. And I think that the fact that he's had 2 surgeries on this knee is not irrelevant to the fact that he has a big toe bunion and some dissociation, or not a good relationship between the big toe, the first metatarsal, the rest of the foot, and the knee. So I had my hand here underneath the bottom of the foot, keeping that first metatarsal down, getting him to experience some internal rotation of the tibia, forcing against my hand. And so this is a drill that is going to be quite difficult to do on your own if you have that experience, but it's literally just paying attention and trying to keep the big toe and the first metatarsal neutral without any significant kind of lifting or extension through the front of the foot. You want to keep that really, really neutral. So in this case, because it was so severe, I had to actually just hold his big toe and his foot when he was doing this drill so that he didn't get that extension. And I think the big lesson here is how you do the movement is important. We had someone join us recently that had a very similar situation, not with a really significant bunion, but he'd actually been doing this tibial internal rotation drill from his physio that he was working with. And I was like, okay, show me how you're doing it. And he was just like, no effort going in or out. And so when I had him on a call and I was coaching him through it, I was like, we need to have intention here. We need to have intensity. And that's what I was doing with Tom. Look at his face. Look at his face when he's putting effort in here. He is getting load into the tissue. He's putting a lot of force into this movement. It's not just like a passive range of motion that we're trying to restore. We're trying to restore strength and neural connection into the tissue. And that's going to come from putting in effort. That is not to say that every single drill that you do needs to be like that. But in this case, it certainly did make his knee feel better. And I think load and intensity in this case is very, very helpful. So that's one of the first things we did. We had a look at his external rotation of the tibia as well. It was fine. He can do that all day, no problem. But as soon as he rotated this bone inwards, the foot was doing really funky stuff. So that's the first thing that we worked. I think we also did some calf raises as well initially, just to test it out. But that's the site of the knee pain. You can see him there kind of just explaining like where he feels the kind of sensation at the front of the knee. And whenever there's pain in that area and the inability to internally rotate this bone, we know we're on the right path, because that is one of the few movements that the knee needs to be able to do. It's a very simple hinge joint for the most part, but the tibia needs to be able to have some internal and external rotation. So that's what we were aiming to restore initially. The next thing we did was just a single leg wall sit. We typically, we pretty much always use some version of this wall sit. It just so happens that Tom couldn't even get his heel closer to the wall. Usually we like to have the foot kind of behind the knee to have a positive shin angle, meaning that the shin is kind of forward and the foot is behind the knee. But in this case, Tom felt much better and had a pain-free experience getting some load into the quad. I'm just shifting his knee away from that internally rotated position, because that's kind of his pattern, and that comes because of this bunion that is very kind of severe. You can imagine that if this bone can't get onto the ground, the knee has to go in that direction, because that's a pattern that has been developed to be able to walk, safely. So the key with this drill is to find a really nice, safe position where you can get a lot of load onto the quads. We want to be able to cover all of this area with a really nice, warm, broad sensation of muscular activity that's going to come from pushing through the foot into the floor. And I think later I actually put a wedge under this area because the knee and the foot was just dumping inwards, because there's a bunch of space there where there's no connection into the ground, neural or mechanical or otherwise. So we had him doing some wall sits. The next drill that I experimented with was something that is in the 7-day challenge, which is a big toe under the wedge, getting into this slouch position and getting the knee forward as possible, feeling that you are really nice and round in the spine, and putting some pressure into the big toe. And the setup here with the kettlebell and the band is just to be able to feel some pressure underneath that first metatarsal. So he's having trouble finding that first metatarsal on the ground. So I put a band under there so that the minute that he loses pressure under that point, the band's going to flip back. So it's a reflexive kind of response that is teaching him that he has to push down through that bone and learn how to push down through that bone with a little bit of extension in the toe with the wedge. So the idea here is to get your knee as far forward as possible, get your whole center of mass as far forward as possible, keep the knee moving as forward as possible, and smash the foot and the big toe down into the ground. And then we're going to get some strength and some neural connection and restore movement in the big toe. So that's the floating heel slouch with wedge that's in our 7-day challenge. We also had him just doing some pronation reps. So we wanted to have a look at how his foot moved as he moves all of his center of mass onto the foot. We're looking at, can he get a comfortable amount of knee bend here? What's happening at the foot when he's going through the gait cycle? Let's say he does 10,000 steps every day. He's going to be recreating that pattern every single time he walks. He's going to be avoiding getting load onto that spot where the wedge is, and the knee's going to go inwards, and it's not going to make the knee feel very good if you do 10,000 steps a day in that pattern. So we had a look at that pattern, and I was looking at what was actually going on in the bones of the foot as he did that. So I found that this is one thing that we do quite a bit, is trying to mobilize this heel bone. So I was manually doing that. It can be very helpful to have some hands-on treatment for the foot, to have someone that knows what they're doing with the foot. It's not always necessary. We can get away without doing that a lot of the time. But take a look at this bone here drops down quite a lot. And that happens because there's no or very limited ability for this heel bone, the calcaneus, to kind of slide backwards and to almost internally rotate. So I was playing around getting some mobility into that heel and kind of preventing that drop of this bone here, the navicular bone, as he bends his knee and gets all of his weight onto the foot. So we did quite a lot of time and effort. You can see the foot kind of fighting back here as he loads all of his mass onto his foot. That bone just loves to come down, this bone here, and the heel's not sliding backwards. So we need to kind of mobilize the heel a little bit and kind of teach the bones to move in another way than they have been probably for the last 10 years. So this will take some time for sure. Like, this is not going to be a 6-week process of just done. The rehab is over in 6 weeks. This will be going on for a long period of time. But we could certainly get him back to a point where he's able to like hike comfortably and ski and snowboard and stuff without the knee being completely locked up. Towards the end of the session, we did some locomotion drills. So I'll just play these and we'll talk about why it's important. The 2 drills that we used here were penguin march and the A-walk. So let's take a look at, I think it's me sort of demonstrating here the A-walk. So we're trying to go heel to midfoot to toe. So there's a little bit of a calf raise at the end here. It's interesting that you see his hands trying to do like the movement. He's doing weird things with his hands, which it's a neurological thing that we see quite a lot. So this is a really brilliant drill that's kind of combining gait pattern and locomotion mechanics and movement, just trying to get more movement through the foot. But the interesting thing here is that look at his shape that his body makes on his right side compared to his left. So if we draw a little line from his head through his hip and his spine and his knee all the way to the foot, look at that bow shape that he makes on his right side, the right side with the knee pain and the serious bunion, and then have a look at the shape that he makes on his other side. If we draw it back to here, it's nice and straight. So this is hip extension. He's able to drive his hip forward on this side. He's able to get nice and tall. Nice, relatively straight line. And so that's going to provide a much stronger knee and just better movement through this whole kinetic chain, right? But as soon as he goes on to his right side, we're in the old pattern of not being able to extend through the hip very well. So most of this movement is going to be coming from his back. He's opening his ribs forward and he's ending up in this bow shape. So this is a knee that doesn't want to really extend comfortably backwards. And so his body is finding another way to get the movement done. So this will take a little bit of practice. He's also completely missing the heel down first. We go heel, midfoot, calf raise. You can see that he just kind of slipped foot down. Let's see if we can find that moment. Anyway, we won't go into that, but just watch here. Boom. He landed on his forefoot there. Forefoot down. And that's not irrelevant to this knee either. So having some precise patterning in these kind of drills is very, very, very useful. Let's see if he goes also forefoot down. The other drill that we used is probably going to help with that. It's a penguin march. We did a few reps practicing the A-walk. The penguin march here. Here we're trying to dorsiflex the ankle. We're trying to lift the top of the foot up. We're trying to get some tension and some activity in the Achilles at the backside, lifting that toe up. And that's why it's called penguin march, because it's like a little bit of a wobble. You're not really bending your knees. And you're trying to strike the ground with the foot. And you're, as soon as possible, trying to lift up the top of the foot. It's a really, really helpful drill. We had him just doing it on the spot initially because you can see that he's really struggling to get any level of lift through the top of the foot and dorsiflexion into the foot. So straight away I was like, well, this is going to be a very useful movement pattern to be able to restore lots of options in the body. Tons of options. He's already a little bit better at it. Here he goes. He's really struggling to stay in a calf raise and lift the top of the foot up. It's a very, very useful drill here. I'm just explaining to him, we want tension in the top of the foot. We want the intrinsic muscles of the foot really active to lift up. And again, weird stuff happening with the hands because this is neurology. It's not necessarily just strength and mechanics. There's neural connections that need to fire and wire together to be able to experience having this movement pattern or have this movement available in the body. And I'm not surprised that there's weird things happening in the fingers, which is pretty much always happens whenever we do like very finite movements, especially with like the toes. What else do we have here? Let's take a look at the next drills. Yeah, then we eventually had him, just doing a lunge, and I was interested to just see, can he lunge comfortably? And by the looks of his face, he's like maybe not super comfortable, but the point is that he woke up not being able to bend his knee, and now he's able to lunge. So that was, I called that a success for the day. The main thing is that we're looking to restore his ability to do a pain-free lunge, and that's going to come from lots of strength development, lots of movement mechanics in the foot, lots of neurological work for the toes and the foot, and some internal rotation. So another drill that we use all of the time for hallux valgus or bunions is to have a wedge under the foot, to pronate the foot, or to do it as best we can, get into a knee bend. No, that's a slouch. So we already did that. I think we did a couple of sets of that. And no, I didn't end up filming the other drill. But anyway, we finished with isometrics. This is a Spanish squat. Probably not something I would give to everyone, but if you get a really, really thick band, wrap it around a post, put that behind your knees, each end of the band around the knees, and then you're trying to get into a vertical position for the torso. It's quite difficult to do. So you're trying to be as vertical here as possible, to have ideally 90-degree angles at the hip and the knee. I'm not doing a great job of it, but we're interested in being able to spend more time and accumulate more time in this position. It is quite intense on the quads. I would love this for skiers, for anyone that has like quad fatigue when they're skiing, this is a very, very nice drill to do. I've been doing it frequently, not frequently enough, unfortunately, but it's a great drill. And we're going to complete fatigue and failure here. So looking at Tom's body from the side, he's able to get a nice straight torso. Maybe we can have the hips down. We have a couple of our clients doing this at the moment, and one of them said that he kind of felt unsafe being in this position. And so what he did was he just had a seat or a block or a bench or something underneath his butt. So if he did fall back, then, you know, he's completely safe. This looks like a fairly extreme position to get in, and it is. And perhaps I wouldn't do this with someone, you know, in week one who's 70 years old and has osteoarthritis, but just getting into this position where you feel a really nice broad quad engagement is very, very helpful. That's going to come from pushing through the feet into the ground. So I think that's what we finished off with in his rehab session. I want him to be very, very, very fatigued. You can see he's struggling here quite a lot, and I think he probably could have pushed a little bit further. But that's going to come from knowing your own body and just having an understanding of like when enough is enough. That only comes from practice and training. You can see on his last set here, he's really fatigued. He wasn't able to get into a vertical sort of spine position. So he's got a little bit of work to do. So I'll take you through the rest of the session so you've got a better understanding of how it's laid out. So we're always going to start with a decent warm-up. In this case, stationary bike. Just spending 10, it says 1 rep, but it's 1 rep of 10 minutes. So 10 minutes on the bike, just getting the quads nice and warm, loads of blood flow into the knee. I didn't end up doing the knee extension drill. I didn't put that into his program because it's probably a little bit too light for him. Then we have a staggered wall sit for 2 sets of 45 seconds. That's like a warm-up set. Then we get into a split squat isometric and a neutral shin angle. I've said 2 sets of 60 seconds per side. Hopefully we can step that up to maybe even 2 minutes or more over the coming weeks. And then this last set again of the staggered wall sit, this one is a final effort, max, just go to complete failure, completely exhausting the quads. So here we're just trying to get the quads really nice and warm so they feel good. Here's our mechanics drill, so that's seated tibial internal rotation. That's all about getting into that movement that we talked about at the start of the video, internally rotating the tibia without weird stuff happening in the toes. He can do that on his own without my help, as long as he's focused on not letting that big toe do whatever it wants. Then we have 3 different big toe exercises, just regular pronation reps, big toe extension in pronation, floating heel slouch with wedge, which is the one that's in the 7-day challenge. Then he has just some regular strength work, again, just to feel like the quads are really working, they're overloaded. In the leg extension, we have a heavy calf raise. I would love to put a hamstring curl in here as well, but it's just going to be a little bit too much. I wanted to create a session that was just like everything in one thing, very, very simple. Repeat this 3 times a week for 6 weeks, and then maybe we can talk about training the backside of the knee as well later. And then we have the isometric finisher, just holding that position with a Spanish squat, and then some locomotion drills, a walk and a penguin march. So I think this could probably be rinsed and repeated for anyone that has a similar kind of experience in the knee. But the main point is, let's go over them. Number 1, a knee problem is not always a knee problem. A lot of the time it's going to be something to do with the foot, and particularly the big toe if you have a hallux valgus or a bunion in the big toe. Number 2, load and intensity in certain movements need to be there. So we need to be able to teach the quads that they can push through the floor, get loads of load into the quad, and to do that safely without a knee pain experience, and to sneak that heel in closer to the wall and have a more comfortable knee bend over time, getting a little bit closer to the wall with a staggered wall sit so we can dorsiflex the ankle, get a more bend to the knee, and feel comfortable doing so. Final thing, getting strength into the big toe and improving movement of how the bones in the foot move. These bones, this is the first thing that we do in the high flow method, is restore movement in these bones to be able to open them as you get all of your weight onto the foot. And that is something that just about everyone is missing. We test that, 3-4 times a week. People will book us in, and we will always look at that because it is the foundation of movement in the foot. It's the foundation of being able to hike comfortably, and lots and lots and lots and lots of people are missing it. So we always test it, have people do drills to improve that movement, and we get them to film it and send it back to us. And then that last thing is just finishing off with more load and intensity, building this from 60 seconds to 2 minutes to 3 minutes maybe, and then improving locomotion at the foot, coordinating everything and pulling it in to have the whole body understand what we're trying to do here, to get the whole body to coordinate. So I realize that was a long video, but it's a complex kind of issue, and I hope that makes it clear to you if you've got knee pain and a bunion.